Everybody likes Scottish guy but you. We love Scottish guy.
Because I know we have waivers for everybody for paintballing, but they need to know how many are actually paintballing today because they need to get all the equipment ready. And that wasn't, a lot of people didn't mark that on their sheet. That's okay, we didn't tell you to. So if you are paintballing today, I know your kids aren't here. So if you can maybe speak up for them. Let's just do a raise of hands if you're paintballing today. And keep them up as well. Actually, I'm just going to count the hands right now, and then I'll say if your kids are doing it, then we'll get them. So this is good for you. So just you are paintballing today. Yes.
We're supposed to raise your hand for?
Yeah, you're going paintball, right?
Oh.
Yeah, I saw Jeff.
You did? There, you can go paintball.
I already got y'all's
Are we
form.
maxed?
Okay. If your kids that aren't here, not you,
Hey, Derek,
are
turn it away.
Oh, you did?
and this is there anybody that's more than one kid?
Who's both?
So two.
I got two kids here.
Two. Okay.
You've been warming up for 24 years?
5, 6, 7.
Yeah, I ain't got a room.
Okay, we're good. You guys skip
Man, I ain't got
That's what I just did. Actually,
Count Skipper.
Is Jacob in?
Yeah, he's
Okay. So Skipper's going. So we're at 42.
Oh, we're good. Tell them to do 45. I guarantee we'll have 3 more show.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I raise my hand or not.
I'll tell him.
This is yours. Thanks, Skipper.
They're good, whatever they are.
I am. Why? Is that like an incentive or? You just want me on your team? Alright guys.
It's so crazy.
You're on, man.
Am I on? I'm on. Okay. All right. Typically, we as guys, I'm doing a section, David just, I guess he's taught it so many times he was tired of it.
That's right.
It was a good reason for me to come. Typically, I've worked with men for a number of years, and I used to go to, I don't as much anymore because my job's changed a little bit, but I used to go to a lot of men's events and things like this. And the typical men's conversation is, hi, how are you? What do you do? Where you live? Right? What do you not do? You don't ask them their name. So David's making off and wear name tags primarily because of me. I'm just going to go ahead and be blamed.
all his
But wear them. And here's why. I have been in church and churches that guys have been together for 10, 15, 20 years. And if you asked them who's that, they could not tell you the guy's name. But they could tell you where they work, where they lived, who their kids was, who their wife was, and all. And there's something about us as men, it's embarrassing for us to say, hey, my name's Fritz, that kind of thing. So we're name tags because we're not going to ask each other, but somewhere down the road, and I don't do that. So do that. My standard rule at any men's event I used to do, I made them all put on stick-on name tags. I usually make them put something like what state you were born or something like that. But we as men generally tend to be very shallow with each other. Why? Because it's risky if we go too deep. I'm exposing myself hey, I should know your name, but I don't. So don't be afraid of that this week. If you're not sure of somebody's name, just a minute ago, Johnny, I couldn't remember your name, and also I'm glad you got your name tag on, but also Gary then told me. So I was like, the other guy, we were at the cabin. I couldn't think of it. So don't be afraid of that. And that's an important thing about this, and that goes beyond just here. Okay? Set the trend with that. I want to do something. First of all, the disclaimer is I'm not an artist. So, you know, if you can draw better, you can come up here. Otherwise, don't complain, right? But I'm going to draw something. I'm going to draw two guys. I'm going to draw. And this is my version of a guy, okay? Is that talent or what? Okay? Oh, here's another guy.
Just pretend like you can see it.
Okay? Hey, duplicates. Here's what I want us to do. Just real quickly, I want on this one, we're gonna do what we call a worldly man. Basically, the general carnal man. Okay? So you describe to me, what are some things about this guy? You know, what is he looking at? What is he talking about? What's on his mind? Give me some of those things, and I'm going to write them up here. But I spell phonetically, so if I misspell it, too bad. All right? What are some things? When you think of the average guy in the world, not Christian man or anything like that, what do we think about? What's on his mind? Hold on. Okay, not too fast. Money?
Christian guy.
What else? Work? Bud Light? Okay, okay. Here's what we're going to do here. We're going to put that. Bud. Okay?
Women.
All right, I won't write sex up there, but we'll just know that goes with that. Okay? Because this might be us like the boys come back in and they're going to say, what were y'all talking about? Okay? What else? What else is on his mind? Sports? Yeah, let's just say he's probably playing sports or doing sports or watching sports.
Betting on sports.
Oh, okay, yeah, betting on sports, okay. What else? What is he looking at? Okay, his eyes are looking at the world. Money.
TV. What everybody else has.
TV. What else?
What everybody else has that he doesn't.
Ooh, okay.
Green.
Keeping up with the Joneses. We're looking at the Joneses.
Looking at the Joneses.
Okay? Trying to keep up with it. I love that commercial. You know, I've got this, I got this, I get this. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. You know, that commercial I absolutely love. What else? Women, okay. Okay. What is he eating? What is he eating? I'm sorry, I'm from Alabama. Eating.
Wings.
Okay.
Barbecue.
Chicken wing.
Potbelly, okay? Okay. Indulging, overindulging and all, okay? What else? Where's he going? Mars? Bars. Oh, bars. Okay, so Mars.
Men are from Mars. They don't go to Mars. They're from Mars.
What else? He's going to work a lot. Okay.
Lazy boy.
Lazy boy. Okay, well that'd be here, right? Okay. Ooh, good one. Okay.
What did you say?
Somewhere where family is not.
Like in the mountains?
But some of us were good, and we brought one. A tucking boy, right? I brought the tucking boy. I can tell you. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much. Now, do you know the guys like this?
No.
Good. Okay. Are you guys like this? Okay. All right. Now over here, godly man. What's on his mind?
Same stuff.
Witnessing the women.
Come on, same stuff. No, not what we see in church. Jesus, you know, the picture of the image there at the end, you know, Jesus standing there waiting for you, you know, that kind of thing. But if we're going to get there, what does this guy have to look like? So start again.
Looking at his family.
Family. Okay, looking at family.
Looking to the cross. All right, Jesus.
Okay. There's the cross. That's probably also on his mind.
Someone's here.
What else?
Faith.
There's an echo in here now. He's thinking about faithful. Is that what you said?
Yeah, being faithful.
Being faithful. Faithful to who?
The family and the God.
Family and to God. Okay, good. What else?
Eternity.
Eternity. You've got eternity in his name. Okay, let's call it Act 4. That's what David described it as a minute ago. Act 4. All right. What the other thing in his eyes? What should he be doing? He should be reading Bible. Okay. His mouth should be his mouth of prayer. All right. Let's draw the Bible in his hands. It's hard to do, really. Okay. What else?
Bringing other people
You know-
to Act 4. Bringing other people to Act 4.
Okay. So let's do that down here on his feet.
What do you say?
Do it down here on his feet. Bringing others or going to others. And bringing others. All right. What they describe? They describe James as what? Oh, camel knees. Why? Because it's prayer. Okay. Okay. What else? You know, one of the things that you could actually, if you wanted to, use the Romans passage about the whole put on the full armor of God. You know, the breastplate of righteousness and all those things. But I won't go there. But I mean, that's an image too that you could have. All right. Now, here's the thing, and why I wanted to do this. We as men are somewhere between this and this. You know, we find ourselves literally, you know, here or here. And what's interesting is we don't always know exactly where we are in this continuum. And the other thing is, as we surround ourselves with other men, what do we do? Even though I might be right here, moving closer to God, if I find myself around guys like this, what do I do? I come this way. Or if all of a sudden I go to church and now I'm at the men's event, and now what do I have to do? Oh yeah, I got to give all the right answers. You know, there's a story about a kid in Sunday school. You know, the teacher asked him. He says, you know, what has a bushy tail, eats nuts, and lives in trees, builds nests? None of the kids said anything. No, it's supposed to be a squirrel. And eventually, they go to one of the girls who's the brightest, and she says, well, what do you think it is? He says, well, I know it's supposed to be Jesus, but it sounds a lot like a squirrel. You know, and that's the way we are when we go to church. We know the answer is Jesus, but, you know, sometimes we feel like a squirrel. And, this, you know, the thing is that we're doing is we're always posing as men. Think about it. We as men are constantly, as I said earlier, because we're somewhere between here and here, if we're talking with guys over here, we pretend to be over here. If we're talking with guys over on this side, we tend to, you know, bump up ourselves. It's Tim the tool time guy. You know, he was always supposedly a master at everything, but then when it came time to you know, do something, what did he do? He screwed up. That's why he had his own private suite at the emergency room, right? And that's where we are as men. David was talking about earlier. We're in Act 3. You know, God put us in Act 3. We desperately want Act 4. Now, Bruce Wilkinson, in some of his writings, he said, you know, that's the problem. We're always, if all there was in life was salvation, why did God leave us here? Well, that's think about that. If all God wanted for us was to accept Him, why didn't, the moment we accepted Christ, we become transformed to glory? It's because we've got something else to do. There's something left for us to do in Act 3. And it goes back to this, bringing others. It goes back to developing our family and all. But we're caught in this trap as men as being posers. Any of you remember the TV show The Pretender? I love that show. If I could have found clips of it, I would have used them. Okay. If you remember that show, it was all based around a guy by the name of Jerry, not the Subway guy. Okay. But Jared, some of you will catch that in a little bit later. But Jared had a photographic memory as a child. He was a child prodigy. The center, which was sort of the evil force in the whole TV show setup, took him, and later we found out he had a twin brother, and brought them to the center and raised them and taught them how to do a lot of things, how to utilize that photographic memory. And the thing that he could do, he could basically read a book and watch something in just a matter of hours become whatever he was. That's the name, the Pretender. And I loved it in the opening line. If you remember, as they came on, they're showing him like as a fireman, as a policeman, as a forest ranger, and all this other stuff and all. But there's one scene that they sort of cut to in the opening, and he's got a doctor's lab coat on, stethoscope, and the whole nine deal. Obviously he's a doctor. And this patient looks up, and the old lady, and says, "Are you a doctor?" And his reply in that, I'll never forget, was, "I am today." What's sad about the whole Pretender thing is, as the story goes on, he wound up leaving the center. He escaped from the center. The whole TV show was around the center trying to catch him and him running. But he left for one reason. He was trying to figure out who he was. And you know what? That's like what we are today. We're constantly, as men, trying to figure out who are we? What are we? Where am I? How do I fit in? What is my purpose? And what's fascinating about that is that as I've watched that over the years and the reruns and everything and thought about it, Jared pretended to be people he wasn't. As he did it, he helped other people. That was always the tagline. Whatever he pretended, he wound up solving a mystery and all. But he never could quite figure out who he was. And I think that's where we are as men today. I think that's what Eldridge writes about when he talks about the whole section here, the poser. And that's what we're going to continue to deal with for a little bit. How do we pose as men? How do we pose? What men?
Try to fit in.
Try to fit in? What? We'll try to blend in? Okay, what else? Okay, like some of you are doing now, right? We pose in a lot of ways. Do you pose with your kids? How do you pose with your kids?
Try to be cool.
Try to be a good example for them.
Okay. When inside us, sometimes we're struggling because we know we're not. What else?
Do as I say, not as I do.
Ooh, tough one there. Yeah, do as I say, not as I do. How do we pose with our wives? We try to be Tim the Tool Time. I can fix anything. I can do anything. We all need directions. We also need something else. We need each other. We need other men to hold us accountable. And we're constantly, the whole thing of posing is centered around one question. And that's, do I have what it takes? David's already mentioned that several times. Do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to be a man? Do I have what it takes to be a godly man? Do I have what it takes to be a good father? Do I have what it takes to be good at my job? And then, do I have what it takes, and this to me is sometimes the toughest question, is do I have what it takes to balance all of this? Because, that's really, I think, one of the ultimate causes of posing, is because we're constantly having to deal with all of those things. And sometimes we pose because we're in a job maybe that we don't really believe in. When I was finished college, between college and seminary, before Deborah and I got married, I was working in several different jobs. And I took a job in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, with a company called Randall Publishing. Randall Publishing does several things. One of them, they do one of the big Who's Who books and things like that. But they also do this trade paper for selling equipment. And I wound up working for a little while with Randall Publishing. And here was the thing. So my job was they would give us paper clips from want ads from papers all over the country. My job was to call that guy up who had a tractor, a backhoe, or whatever, and try to sell him an ad in a magazine that was published across the country. Okay? Now, in reality, if a guy's got a tractor in Indiana, okay, what's the likelihood he's going to sell it to somebody in California? Okay? What's the likelihood that the guy in Alabama that's got a backhoe is going to sell it, in Washington State? But my job was to call that guy and convince him that he could do it. I caught myself in that time as a poser. Now, I understood the techniques. I knew what to do. I went through the training. I could do it. But in my heart, every time I called that farmer up that might be struggling from paycheck to paycheck to make a living, knowing my job was to sell him an ad that really wasn't going to benefit him, I struggled. And I only worked there 2 weeks. Because after the first week of training, and I started doing it live, I physically would get sick going to work. Why? Because I did not believe in what I was being asked to do as a job. The crazy thing was, for some reason they decided that I could teach folks, and I wound up teaching other folks coming into the thing how to do it, and they became really good at it. But I caught myself in an opposing situation because I was teaching and trying to do something that I did not believe in. And I think that's what we as men do, is posing. Another reason I think we pose is sometimes we're living our parents' dreams. Had a good friend of mine in seminary in North Carolina. He was a good friend and all like this and everything. He grew up, he was the fifth of 5 sons, so they had their own basketball team, He was pretty good at basketball too, because he was the point guard. But he was the good guy. David was talking about that earlier, about being good, being the nice guy. And he grew up in the church in North Carolina, being the nice guy. Oh, everybody loved Scott. Scott was the apple of everybody's eye. He was the guy, he was the main guy in the youth group. And Scott let all of that push him towards what he felt was a calling. And I went to seminary with Scott for about 3 years. And then I graduated, and then a year later, it wasn't because I was there this happened, but just the story is the whole point. About a year after seminary, Scott came to realize God didn't call me, my parents did. And he had put himself through college with the intent to become a minister. He had put himself through seminary with the intent to become a minister and all. And he rebelled against God pretty bad. Why? Because all of his life, he was pushed into that whole thing of posing to be something he wasn't. He was living his parents' dream. We also pose sometimes because really and truly, we don't know what we are. We don't know where we are. I know I'm somewhere in between here, but who is the real Fritz? Is it this guy or this guy? And we're constantly struggling with that. And there's a turmoil there. And I think that's the important thing to understand in that whole deal is we're constantly coming back, sitting back, and every time you're alone, and maybe on the John, we always do a lot of thinking on the John, I don't know why. But you're on the John, and you're exposed and all of this, and what are you doing? You think, who am I? Can I do this? Where do I live? What does God want from me? And we're always struggling with that kind of thing. I know that's a scary image of somebody sitting on the ground. They'd be back there laughing. But now, here's the thing that I want you to understand. As men, like I said, we're always between here and here. But I want you to do something for just a minute. I want you to think about something. This is something that I love struggling with. If you were to paint a picture of Jesus, what comes to mind when you say, show me a picture of Jesus? What do you think of? Y'all have seen them in the churches. You got the picture in there. What is it? Nice, soft face.
Long hair.
Long hair. It's pretty hair too. Real pretty hair. Beard. What else? Huh? Robe. Yeah. He's in his robe.
Crown of thorns.
Sandals. Okay. He's got kids around him sometimes. Okay. The image that we typically have of Jesus is a white-faced pretty boy. Think about it. I grew up in a small Baptist church, and in every Sunday school room there was this picture of Jesus with this white-faced pretty boy. Jesus was a Jew. So first of all, he was probably olive skinned, at least. Maybe even dark skinned. He probably had curly hair. He probably had a beard because Nazarites didn't cut their beard. They didn't shave. But they also didn't have soap and water, so when they bathed, they probably did a good job. But the image we as men have as Jesus is this white-faced pretty boy. Now, I want you to think about who were the guys that Jesus attracted. Who were they? Fishermen, sinners, tax collectors, the downtrodden. Who did he not attract? The white-faced pretty boys in church. You know, and it goes back to I'm sorry, this is elevated. You can pay me later. David was saying earlier, we in the church have told men to be a godly man. It means just come in, sit down, shut up, and be nice. Do what's expected and nothing more. Go along. And as David's been saying to this point, everything that is and what that says goes entirely against how God made us. God made us to be what? To be warriors. He made us to be kings. Eldridge has come out with a new book that I'm reading right now. It's The Way of the Wild Heart. I know Gary, we were talking about it. He was listening to it and some others. And he uses the whole term he uses the thing of this continuum of a man going from this to this is basically stages. First of all, there's a boy stage, and then there's a cowboy stage. And that's your youth, your recklessness. Then there's the warrior stage, which is your 20s and 30s. Then there's a king stage, it might be 30s and 40s. And then there's a sage stage. Okay? Say that real fast, it messes you up. The sage stage is basically, as you think about it, the mentor, the person. And what Eldridge is saying in The Way of the Wild Heart is that we are all in that continuum somewhere. And sometimes, yes, we may be the age of a cowboy, but we may have moved on spiritually to a warrior. We might have a person that is a sage in our life, but at the same time we might have a young son. And all. And so as we're going through that, as we're doing all of that and everything, go back to what I was saying about the people Jesus attracted and who he didn't attract. He attracted who? The fishermen. How many of you love to fish? Okay? How many tax collectors are in here? Okay. Also known as accountants. Okay? Managers. You know. People, bosses. Okay? There were some other guys. There was this guy, there was a zealot. Simon the Zealot. What was a zealot's job? The zealot's whole goal in life was to overthrow the Roman Empire. Okay? That's what he lived for. He lived just to kill Romans. Okay? The guy carried those with all the time as a policeman, right? These guys were not the nice guys. Now my question to you is, if Jesus was a white-faced pretty boy, do you really think he would have attracted those guys? So I want to destroy your image that most of us have in church about Jesus. Jesus, what did he do growing up? He was a carpenter. You got any carpenters in here? I know Ron is. You know any carpenters? Back here, your name? Logan. Logan's a carpenter. Okay. You guys come here a minute. I'm going to use you as images. Sorry, it's scary. Come on up, Logan. I won't embarrass you to death. Okay? Okay? Alright, his hands are sort of dried and calloused. Okay?
Yes, for sure.
Alright, shake my hand. When you shake hands with a carpenter, how many of you shaking hands with a carpenter? Your hand is shook, right? He may not be, Hulk Hogan here, but he's strong. He's got a grip. And when he shakes hands, he shakes with intention. The other things about carpenters, what else do you notice about them? They're ugly. I get to do that without somebody saying it. But you know what? You look just like them. Right? And that was my point, is they look just like you. Okay, y'all go sit down, I'm sorry, I embarrassed you. God shoot me with a paintball every day while I run away from you. But the thing is, if Jesus walked up when he was a white-faced pretty boy to a bunch of guys sitting there been out fishing all night, and he said, hey, drop what you're doing and go with me, it wouldn't have happened automatically. So there had to be something about Jesus' character and Jesus, the way he carried himself, and his confidence in who he was as a man and what his mission was in life, that when he walked up and said, hey Peter, how you doing? You know, and if you remember their encounter, they've been fishing all night, they haven't caught anything. He sent them out, and he says, oh, drop your nets. Here's a partner. He said, tell this professional fisherman where to go, drop the net on the other side. And they catch lots of fish. You know, that probably got his attention. You know, any of you that fish, if you go with somebody that catches a lot of fish, you want to go back with them, right? Okay? So that caught their attention. So he had some sense about it, but he also had this whole presence about him that says, you know, my name's Jesus. Peter, nice to meet you. You want to learn how to fish for men instead of fishing for fish? Peter goes, huh? He didn't know what that meant. But what did he say to him as they talked? He said, come and see. He didn't say, hey, drop down, give me everything, and, drop away with everything. He said, just come follow me, come walk with me. And I'll teach you how to do more than what you are. I'll teach you how to be more than what you are. And Peter, down the road, he said, you're going to change the world. Peter at that point had to stop posing. He had to make a decision. He was caught there at that moment. Am I going to do what I know how to do? Or am I going to see what this guy's all about? Now, the thing with this is, as we go through all this and think about it, Peter at that moment, when he got up and left, and the other guys that got up and left, they had no idea what they were getting into. They didn't. Other than, here's a guy that, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy's confident. He's ugly. But yet, there's something about his personality and his spirit. There's something attractive about who he is as a man that I'm willing to give up this and move over here. And, that's really where we are today as men. We're all caught in this whole image, in this whole game of posing. We go to church. Put on the right clothes. Put on all the stuff. Use all the stuff. Let's download the spiritual jargon. Let's go sit in Sunday school and be quiet because we don't want to open our mouths because, we might say the wrong answer. Then we go to work. Oh man, did you see that last night? And the swimsuit issue's out. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And we become something that we're probably more like, but yet as trying to become a godly man, we don't need to be. I want to show you a clip. Now, back up. Let's use those two verses. I've got ahead of myself. Let's throw those two verses up here. What did Jesus say about posing? Who were the posers? It was the scribes and the Pharisees. It was the religious. Why do we hear people say, I'm not going to church because of you hypocrites up there? Why? Because their image of what a godly man is not what they see in us. And what did he say in Matthew there? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are whitewashed tombs on the outside, which appear beautiful, but inside they're full of dead men's bones and uncleanliness. What was he telling the Pharisees? The religious folks, the white-faced pretty boys. He said, look, you may look good on the outside, but inside, you stink. You're not what you appear to be. You're too caught up in, did I wash my hands before I ate? Is there any pork in this? Did I get up and, do all the right stuff? Did I take my hat off when I prayed? Did I do all those things that we call being, quote, good and godly? When really inside, there's nothing to you, you're bones. Next verse. In Matthew 23. So you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you're full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Does that describe you at times? When you go to church at Sunday, why do we not participate in church? Why do we not sing? The whole thing of singing, Brandon will tell you, because he studied worship and things and all, and you talk to anybody that studied worship, David preached on worship one time in the series, I think, if I remember right. The whole point of worship is what? God, I'm a wretch. And because of grace, you saved me. And I want to sing, I want to praise you. Why? Because you've taken me from this, and you're trying to move me to this. But what this verse says is that those guys on the outside, they wanted everybody to think they were here. But they were over here. You see them posing? I want to show you a clip from Braveheart now that I mentioned just a minute ago. This is, David uses this clip a lot with this. I use it from a different perspective. And I want you to watch it. It's the Battle of Stirling. It's the first big battle that they were in. The thing is, there's basically three groups of men you will see in this. The first group of men you'll see are the nobles. They would be the Pharisees. Okay? Their whole deal in life is to get more land and appease the British so they get more land. And everybody under them keep them down, the peasants. Then, at the end of it, you'll see William Wallace. William Wallace is the hero of the story. And he comes riding in, he's more of this. Okay? So you've got the nobles that are really more of this, and you've got William Wallace who's more of this godly man. Now, I'm not trying to say he's Christ and all this other stuff. Don't take it there. But he is the man that men are wanting to become. He's the man that they're willing to drop what they're doing and follow. And then the other two men that I really want you to focus on through this clip are two farmers, two peasant farmers. And one's a younger one, one's an older one. And they have this dialogue through here. And what I want you to notice is how they're caught between here's what I know and here's what's comfortable. But here's this guy that comes up and he's painting this picture for me. And he's asking me to drop whatever I'm doing and follow him. Run.
Well, what news? We're outnumbered. At least 3 to 1.
How many horse then?
300. Maybe more.
300 heavy. We must try to negotiate.
Well, who was in command? Did he have the Scarlet Sherman?
Aye, he did.
Still negotiate. I raise him to the top of it. I can't hear it. It's good. The nobles will negotiate. They do a deal. And we go home. If not, we charge. 300 heavy horsemen with no chance. Have they come here to fight so they could own more lands? And I have to what for? Not me. All right, lads. I'm not dying for these bastards. Let's go home.
presenting yourselves on this battlefield. I give you thanks. This is our army. To join it, you give homage. I give homage to Scotland. And if this is your army, why does it go? We didn't come here to fight for them.
Oh, the English are too many.
Sons of Scotland, I am William Wallace.
William Wallace is 7 feet tall.
Yes, man. Kills men with a hundred. And if he were here, he'd consume the English with fireballs from his eyes and bolts of lightning from his arse. I am William Wallace. And I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do without freedom? Will you fight? Against that? No. We will run. And you will live. Right? Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
So what'd you see there? You see the nobles? They were stuck in the world. Let's just, let's negotiate. We've got to negotiate. What else did you see when the army came in from the nobles? You saw defeat, didn't you? They were already defeated before the first wave of horses even got on the field. They were willing to give up. They wanted to negotiate to get them go home. What'd you see when you saw Wallace riding in? He was dressed for battle, wasn't I haven't done it, but it hit me while I was standing over there, and I tried to count quickly. I think there were 12 guys with him on horses in that scene coming in. It's a parallel there, isn't it? They didn't have the army. The army was already there. Not only was he dressed for battle, when he looked across, what did he see? He saw suckers. He already saw the battle won. Why? Because he was confident in that he knew he had what it took. He had the passion. He had the purpose. He had the sense of calling. It wasn't a sense of duty or obligation. It was everything he did was a sense of passion. And then we go back to where I wanted you to focus, the two guys. Why did they leave their farms and come down the hill? Because they heard there was this guy named William Wallace. 7 feet tall. Slayed thousands of men. Why did they come down? Why did they leave? Why couldn't they just stay up the hill? Because in their hearts, God had instilled a passion for a battle to fight. God had instilled in there that there was an adventure. And William Wallace just might be the path to that adventure. So I'm going to take away from my family, I'm going to take away from work, I'm going to take away from all the things, all the posing that I'm doing, and come down the hill and just look and see. And when they got there, what did they see? All that they saw in front of them were these guys. And he got to the point where he had to make a decision. All he saw was these guys, and he says, you know what? I'm not going to risk my life for these guys just so they can have more land and tell me what to do. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to what I was doing. I'm going to go back to my pretending that I'm living a purposeful life and live. Because that was the whole dialogue between him and Gibson when they came in. He says, I'm not going to die for them. You know, I can go home and live. But what did Wallace say? Yeah, come on, live. Live to be old. But you'll always ask yourself, did I have what it takes? If I could go back and change one thing, would I go back and fight? And that's the whole point of that's the whole battle of the posing that we do as men. We're constantly struggling with that thing. Do I have what it takes? And somewhere in here, when we choose to pose, we choose to be something we're not, that's just like those guys would be willing to turn and go home and just live a quiet life, a peaceful life, and just exist. Or can I be more? Can I be the guy that God made me to be? Can I reach the potential? What's fascinating in that scene as you fast forward at the end of it, that guy is standing there and he looks across at Wallace and they acknowledge each other. It's really pretty neat. The problem, I think, with our posing has to do with the mistake I think we make with churches. And I blame myself, I blame pastors, I blame historic things. What we traditionally call church, what we traditionally call religion. Okay? You hear guys all the time, I don't want religion, I don't need religion. Because all they see in what we call religion are guys like this pretending to be guys like this. And if we're going to become the godly man that God's designed us to be, if we're going to fight the battle, if we're going to rescue the beauty, if we're going to live an adventurous life, then we have to come to that point where we make a decision. Unfortunately, what we call making a decision for Christ is maybe 1,000th of what I believe Christ really meant by that. There are many men in our churches, and women and children and all in our churches. There's leaders in our churches. There's pastors in our churches that made a decision. But that wasn't what Christ was talking about. Go back to those two guys. When they all those guys started cheering and made the decision to fight, did they look like who they were at the beginning of that scene? What did they look like at the beginning of the scene? They were just sort of standing there wandering around. And when the army came in, they looked defeated. But when Wallace came and said, guys, here's what you can be. Here's what God's made you to be. Here, you've got this chance to be free. Free me. They made a decision, but the decision transformed them. And I believe with all my heart, why do we pose? Why do we pretend, to be godly men when we're not? Why are we always, screwing up? It's because we've made a decision to maybe believe in Christ. We've made a decision to I'll accept Christ, but I'll accept Him as long as I can stay what I am. As long as I don't have to change. I believe one of the biggest failures that we're doing with the church today is we're not making a decision. We're talking too much about making a decision for Christ. I was with somebody the other day, and I tell you, this words just infuriate me when I hear them. I have to bite my tongue because I live in those religious circles. They prayed the prayer. Now, there's nothing wrong with praying a prayer. That's an act of making a decision and all. But if all you do is pray a prayer and you get your Act 4 ticket, you missed the boat. You got in the wrong line to buy the ticket. What Christ was talking about when He said, go and make disciples, He was talking about transformation. And you see, too many times we sell others, and sometimes even ourselves, we pray the prayer. We make a decision to try to be good. But what does the Bible tell us about being good? No matter what we do, we ain't going to be good enough. No matter how much with my son I try to be a good dad, I'm always going to screw up. And I can tell you, and he can tell you time and time and time and time that I did. That was just on the way up here. We can't be good enough. We can't make just a decision and some magic thing's going to happen. What it is when someone says something about accepting Christ, we have to become transformed. Now, does that mean we're not going to pose anymore? No. But what it does mean, and it goes back to that whole image of Jesus asking those fishermen to come, there was something about His presence, just like William Wallace, there was something about the fact that he looked like he was ready to fight. He looked like he had a plan. He looked like he knew he was already won. There was something about that was attractive to those guys. Just like Peter and the rest of the gang saw something in that carpenter who was a real man. David, what's the real acronym? I couldn't remember that.
Reject passivity.
Reject passivity.
Expect a greater reward.
Expect a greater reward.
Accept responsibility.
Accept responsibility.
Lead courageously.
Lead courageously. If you don't walk away with anything else, remember that. I haven't wrote it down yet, so that's why I can't remember it. But if you're going to be a real man, that's what you have to do. You have to be, and being real means what? Being transformed. If you're going to reject passivity, you've got to transform past that. If you're going to expect something, and if you think about those, what did you see up there of Mel Gibson's character? All of those things. He was real to those guys. And the whole point was, those guys came as peasants because they heard there might be something. But they left transformed to be free men. And that's the same image that we have in Christ. We come to Christ because we know there's something there that He has that we don't. And if we accept Christ and be transformed in Christ, we now have all the potential of being the godly man that you see up here. Being the godly man that you see in Christ. Did it work for Peter then? Yeah, it did. Why? I can prove that to you right now. Because you're sitting here and we're talking about Jesus. It worked. Peter was transformed. But there was one of those 12 that wasn't there? He made a decision to follow Christ, didn't he? He posed as a Christian, as a Christ follower, for 3 years. He was Judas. Put the scripture up there. Romans 12, 1 and 2. I love this verse. I'm going to show it here. Therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present yourself bodies a living sacrifice, a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. This New American Standard. King James. Somebody, King James. Therefore, brethren, I beseech you to be transformed, is the way it's translated in King James.
Well, hold on. I had it.
Isn't it? You got King James? But no, that's okay. It says that, basically. Right, huh?
Beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, that you present bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service.
Go to the next one.
And be not conformed to this world, be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and make prove that what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God.
Okay? Be not conformed, but be transformed. What Paul says there, guys, you don't have to pose. If you're in Christ, you don't have to pose. If you're in Christ, you can be a real man. You should be a real man. But I would go back and say, Paul would go back today and tell us, guys, if you just made a decision, if you just prayed a prayer, you punched the ticket, you're still conformed. And your posing is hurting you. It's keeping you from God. It's keeping you from knowing God and becoming a little Christian. It's keeping you from being this. Here's the scary thing, guys. It's keeping your wives from becoming that. It's keeping your children. Deuteronomy even talks about grandchildren and great-grandchildren. You know, that's the amazing thing. David talked earlier about a church last night, about a church that reaches men. I can tell you there's all kinds of studies out there. And what the devil knows is if I can take the man out of church, I hurt that family for 4 generations. But and Christ says, you know what, if I can get that man, if I can get the Peters to follow me and become godly men and don't pose, I can impact the world forever. And that's why we're here today, because that happened. How many of you are familiar with the Message? I know David uses it sometimes in church. The Message, Eugene Peterson translated it. Eugene Peterson was a Bible scholar. He worked with the Navigators. And I, several years ago, came across the Message. And I just tell you, I use it in my quiet time especially. And the reason why is, you know, we all know, for God so loved, keep going, y'all finish it. And that's usually how we remember it, for God so loved. Okay? But when I read it in the Message, it takes on a new life. So I haven't done that. And I want to read Romans 12, 1 through 3 for you from the Message. The little tagline above the paragraph is, place your life before God. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you. That's an important phrase there. God helping you. What did he say? Peterson translates it and says, you can't do this alone. God's got to transform you and God's got to be with you. God's got to be over here modeling this. And he does that by being in the Bible. He does it by you following him. He does it by you surrounding yourself with other godly men. Okay? So here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life. In other words, your normal, everyday activities, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Don't become so... How Peterson translates this, he says, guys, don't pose. Don't be so used to hanging around with guys like this that you automatically become one every time you're around them. That's what he's saying. Don't pose. Instead, fix your attention on God. Picture the godly man. Put that image in front of you. And you'll be changed from the inside out. What is transformation? What's a transformer? Any electricians here? Some of you guys build electricity? What happens in a transformer?
It changes one thing to another.
Changes one thing to another, okay? A transformer with a utility line, the utility lines you see feeding this place are at a very extremely high voltage. Okay? But when it comes out this plug right over here, it's 110 voltage. How does it get from here to here? There's a transformer. It takes the big current and steps it down to this. A transformer may be on an attachment. You may have something that's DC and you plug into a 12-volt battery thing, but you're running AC. Okay? And it transforms it from DC current to AC current, or the other way around. Okay? So what it's saying is here, you'll be changed from the inside out. You'll be transformed. If you give your everyday life to God, if you don't pose, and you picture God, and you understand this 4-act play, and you understand the fact that God has a battle for you to fight. God wants you to rescue the beauty. What beauty are we talking about? The bride of Christ. He wants us to bring, I love this, bring others. Rescue others. It might be your family. It might be your parents. It might be your grandkids. But He wants you to fight that battle. Be willing to fight that battle to bring others to be transformed. And then through that, He lives an adventurous life. Was there anything ordinary about Jesus' life in the Gospels? There wasn't. In fact, that was His whole problem with the Pharisees. Why? Because He didn't follow the rules. He didn't play nice. Every time they tried to trip Him up, He was smart enough to know that they were trying to trip Him up. Just like in the opening scene, when Gibson comes up, and he says, "You pay homage to us because this is our army." And what does he say? For presenting yourself here, for being willing to come and fight, I salute you. I thank you. But I do not pay homage to you because you're not who I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for freedom. That's what God's telling us. Don't pose. Know what you're fighting for. And guys, I'm going to tell you, you have what it takes to be godly men. Why? Because if God is in you, you are transformed to be a new creature. Old things pass away. Now, I love that translation because for some reason we interpret that as, you know what, your old self is just light switch, boom, you don't ever go back to it. Right? Old things pass. When you pass what? When I pass the ball to David, it just doesn't magically go from my hand to his hand. It travels. And that's what this is. This is a spiritual journey here, guys. And as we're following Christ, we are transformed as we move along. Can we back up? Can we pose? Yeah. But the more we focus on becoming this and walking with God, we have what it takes. But it's just like when Peter got out of the boat. He had what it took to walk on water because his eyes were fixed on God. But the minute he looked and said, "Golly," what did he do? He sunk. Because he knew he was doing something he wasn't supposed to do. And he lost the image of what he's trying to become. He goes on, readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Peter, come. So Peter got it. Man. Okay? And it wasn't until he stopped and realized he was doing something beyond his abilities. He went back into that old land, that old nature. He did that a lot. I love Peter. God, I love you. You're the Son of God. I believe in you. I will fight. I will die for you. I don't know him. God damn it, I don't know him. That's what he said at 5. I don't know who this guy is. Quit trying to put me with him. And then you have the beautiful scene at the end where, again, Peter and the boys have gone fishing. Why? Because their picture of what Jesus was going to be was a king, a ruling king. He's gone. He's dead. I'm going to go fishing. So they went out and fished. That night, they didn't catch anything. Next morning, as they're coming in, they see this guy standing on the beach. Hey, you caught anything? No. Well, why don't you cast your nets on the other side? Does this sound familiar?